Hey crafty people, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. Over the years I've dabbled in most types of crafting, although for the past decade or so I've been doing primarily card making and mixed media art. I've recently embarked on a junk journaling journey that I hope you'll join me on. And today we're going to create a Snowglobe pop-up box Christmas card. Let's get crafting! So we're going to be creating a couple of Snowglobe pop boxes today, and the first one I've got to create, I'm using, this is the My Favorite Things Outside of the Box Level Up die set, and it creates a pop box that's got a lower front, and then the side pieces are these little triangle shapes. And so I've already gone ahead and cut out the various parts, but I realize not everybody has pop box die sets. That's a mouthful. So I'm also going to show you how you can create a pop box if you don't have a set of dies, because it's really just a matter of measuring, cutting, and scoring some paper. The dies just make it a little easier and faster to do. So let me go through the parts that I have cut out with the dies, and then we'll go through how you can recreate that if you don't have dies or something similar. It's not going to be exactly the same, obviously, because it's not using the dies. So the back panel has this lovely little arch, which is why it is going to make like a snow globe scene is what we're going to end up doing. So in addition to the parts that make up your pop box, the die set also comes with mats to go on those pieces. And so I cut out the background mat, and this is out of watercolor cardstock. And then I used, this is the Fawn windy background die to give it some swirly interest. And we're gonna ink this with Distress Inks in a minute. But I want to cut out the pieces for our non-die pop box first so that I can ink all of the two background pieces together. So we've got that, which will go on here. Then I cut out the two side pieces, and you'll see with the die, it comes pre-scored. So all you have to do is fold on the score line for attaching. And we'll attach it to the back piece, and this will go on after we do everything's attached. And then I cut out the front strip, which again, pre-scored. And so that will get attached to the side pieces to create the front of our box. Then you need insert pieces. Now this die, the size of the pop-up box will create enough space to do 4 inserts. I'm only doing 3 on this one, and I need to do some erasing because I used some low-tack tape to hold my die in place when I ran it through the die cutting machine, and it left some smoosh behind. Now this die set also comes with coordinating dies to create like hillsides, or in this case snowbanks, for going on the inserts, and of course they are scored on the ends and get folded like that. But I don't have them. I thought they were a little bit on the pricey side, especially since I have a variety of hillside dies, and so I figure I could just take a hillside die and we can just add it on to the piece and trim around to give it a hillside look without having to buy any extra dies. So that's what we're going to end up doing. I did cut out a couple of my hillside dies for doing that out of white cardstock so that we can have snowbank shaped inserts instead of just straight inserts, which hopefully this is making sense. I feel like I'm not making much sense. Okay, and I cut out the background one more time because we want to create the look of a snow globe, so we want to have a front piece. And I cut it out using the die for the background and the die for the mat. Let me go grab those. This way, if you are playing along and you do have the dies, I can show you exactly what I did. So when I went to run it through my die cutting machine, what I did was I put down this die first on my piece of paper. Then I lined up this die as centery as I could get it. And then I used some low tack tape to tape the pieces together so that they didn't shift while I was cutting to get this frame piece. And not thinking, I also die cut it out of the frame, the matte piece out of acetate, because I want to create that window effect of a snow globe. And then I realized after I did that, well, if I used this die to cut this hole, they're going to be the same size. That's not going to work. So I'll use that for something else. But that's how I got this piece. And if you are finding your low tack tape is a little too sticky, even though it's a low tack tape, my suggestion is take your piece of tape and just tap it against your shirt, your pants, the back of your hand, and something like that, and it will reduce the tackiness of the tape if you do that, and it will still hold your die in place when you're cutting, but is less likely to cause rips in your paper. So that's my tip if you have this die set and are following along and using it to create your pieces. So what I want to do first is I do want to show you how this looks and how this gets assembled before we start cutting the pieces for our no die pop-up box. This way, if you've never seen a pop-up box made, it'll hopefully make more sense when we get to creating the pieces for our no die version. I'm going to put down my cutting mat just so I have a firmer surface, because this is a silicone mat, so it's got a little give and squishiness to it. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to assemble the box and work on assembling these pieces as well. So I'm going to take my pieces and fold on the score lines and just burnish it down to make sure we've got a good score going. And do that for the front piece. And I'm going to attach this one to the side on the inside like so. And I'm going to use my Barely Arts glue because it gives me a little bit more wiggle time than my art glitter glue. You can use score tape if you want, but just bear in mind any kind of double-sided tape you use is not really going to let you move it around very much. You could also use glue stick if that's what you prefer. As you know, I'm not a big glue stick fan. Let's get my Barely Art unclogged. I'm just gonna line it up like so. So it's all the way over, and then fold it over. So that should give me a good fit so that it's lined up all the way on the side there, like that. All right. Now I'm gonna do the same for the front piece. I'm just gonna line them up and glue them down. He's just jiggling around all over the place. All right, let's see if we can get that lined up right. And we did. So that's our front of the box. Now we're going to add the other side on. Now, at this point, you have two options. You could close your box up and then add your little inserts for your decorations. Or I generally prefer to put them in before I seal my box up And this time, because we are going to be adding some hillsides to them, I'm going to fold and score my 3. And add my little swirly hillsides. I think that's a little high. And what I'm pretty much going to do is just glue my tab bit down and then trim off the excess. So for this, I'm going to grab my art glitter glue because it dries. It adheres a little faster, and I don't think I'm going to need as much wiggle time for these. So I'm just going to add some glue. Glue that down, hopefully straight-ish. And then grab my scissors. And trim off the excess. So there we go. Now we've got a little wavy hillside or snowbank. And then I'm going to do the same for this one. I'm just going to attach it. And that one can go in with that, and then one more. Just gonna wipe off my excess glue. And it doesn't really matter that this piece is shorter than this one. You're not really gonna see it inside the box, so I'm not worried about that. And we're gonna trim this off, and I'm wondering if this hillside might be a little too big. We'll figure it out. To add them to the box, I am gonna start on this side. And you just wanna make sure your tab is below your side. And so I'm gonna go down at least to there. Let's see how I like the look of that, because I think I might wanna bring it down so that let's see. I think I'm going to stick this one in first, actually. Is that going to be too high? All right, we're going to stick this guy down about here. And then I think I'm going to stick this one about there. So when it closes up, that's how our hills are going to be going. That one dips low in the back. That's okay, because that one's kind of high over here. And I'm going to do glue over here and just kind of stick that one down there. Probably would be slightly easier if I was using the actual dies that came with the set, but I don't have them, so we're going with this. Now I'm going to put the glue on these tabs, fold this over, and there we go. They're all nice and glued on. sure they're nice and glued on. And then we're gonna glue this tab to that. Just gonna make sure it's lined up properly. So the card will stand up like this, and so here's what it'll look like. But it then will fold flat, and once folded down like that, it measures 5.5 by about 4.25. So it will fit in the standard size envelope that holds a 5.5 by 4.25 card. So I was looking to figure out some measurements for this project, some of my pop-up box dies. Since we want the piece to be 5 inches wide, so it'll fit in the envelope, the front piece on this one is 3.5, and the side piece is 2 inches. So let me show you with my ruler. So 3.5 and then 2 inches, which gets us to 5.5. And then your background needs to be no higher than 4.25 inches so that it'll fit in the envelope. Now I have some Lawn Fawn ones where the front piece is more like 3.25. So unless you want to make it really, really shallow, I would not recommend going more than 3.5 long for your front piece. And please excuse my hands, I was coffee dyeing again. And then if you do 3.5, you do 2 on the side. If you did 3.25, you could do 2.25 for your side piece. And then the tabs, I'm trying to think, these tabs are probably maybe half an inch. They're about half an inch. The tabs on the inserts, I think, are probably closer to 1/4 inch. Let me just double check. No, they're just shy of half an inch. So now you want your insert pieces probably to be a little bit shorter than your box, but they can be the exact same height. And for this one, the height of the front piece is about 1 inch. This is completely up to you. I have made pop boxes that, and on the angled piece, it's 2 inches. So I've done ones where it's been 2 inches all around. This is completely up to you. So this is where you get to customize. You know, with the dies, you're pretty much stuck with whatever measurements the company made. But if you're doing it without a die, you get to decide how tall you want the front piece, how long you want it, how deep you want it. Just keep in mind that you want to make sure your front piece and your side piece added together, once assembled, is 5.5 or smaller, if you want to be able to make sure it will fit in an envelope and that your height is only 4.25 inches. So what we're gonna do to create our non-die pop box is I'm gonna pull out my paper trimmer. And for this one, I am grabbing some green cardstock, and we are gonna cut. We need our front strip and our side strips. And I think I can show you how to create the down slant. I think I'm actually gonna go a little higher for my back than on this one. So just to show you that you can, I'm gonna cut my piece at 2.5. And let's go a little narrower. And so we're gonna, for the front, so we're just mixing it up a little bit. So I'm gonna do 2.25, but I need a tab, so that's 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna cut this piece at 2 3/4. And then for this piece, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna cut at 2 3/4. So these are my two sides. So I cut them at 2.5 by 2 3/4. Then I need a front strip. This is why I should do the math beforehand instead of on the fly. So I did 2.5 high and 2.25 plus a half wide because I need my 1/2-inch tab. So I'm going to bring the front, I think I'm going to make it 1.5 inches high. And since I made it 2.25 wide, this needs to be 3.25 wide, which will get me to 5.5. But I also need to, so I did 1.5 high. I need 3.25 wide plus a 1/2 inch on either side. So that's 4.25. So now that I have thoroughly confused you, let's recap on how we come to our measurements for these pieces. This ended up being 4.25 by 1.5, and these ended up being 2.5 by 2.75. I decided how tall I wanted my sides to be at their highest and then at their lowest, because we're going to do the triangle. I'm going to show you how you can do the triangle if you don't have the die for your side pieces. So I decided I wanted it 2.5, and that I wanted to decrease down by 1 inch so that my the height of the shortest part of the side piece is going to be 1.5. Therefore, my front piece needs to be the same size as the lowest point on my side piece, so that's 1.5 inches. For our widths, I decided I wanted my front piece to be 3.25 inches, but I need tabs to attach the side pieces to. So I added a 1/2 inch for either end to create tabs. So that made this piece 4.25 inches wide. And because I went with 3.25 for the front, so my side pieces could be no wider than 2.25 inches wide, because when I attach the front and the sides together and I collapse it down, this measurement can't exceed 5.5 if I want to make sure it will fit nicely in an envelope. So if I've got 3.25 for this piece, 2.25, and I add 2.25, that gets me to 5.5. But I also need a tab on the back of this piece to attach to the back piece back here. So I added a 1/2 inch, so that got us 2.75 inches for this. So with that in mind, you can adjust your box size to anything. You could do a little itty bitty box that's really long and deep if you wanted. You can do wider than 3.25 and have it a very shallow box. All you need to keep in mind is your front piece and your side piece widths added together should stay at 5.5 or less so that it will fit in your envelope nicely. Alternatively, if you want a really tall, if you want a taller box, keep your measurements for your front and your side piece below 4.25, and then you can go up to 5.5 for your back piece. That's another way you can do it. So I'm just giving you like, this is the how you get to your measurements so that you can adjust this to whatever size you would like to do for your box. So what we're going to do now is we are going to score our pieces. And I know we don't have the back piece yet. We are getting to that. Pull out my scoreboard. I'm going to take my front piece and score it at a 1/2 inch in on either side. So that's because I went with 4.25. I score at 3.75. Turn it around, score again at 3.75, and then I fold my pieces over. Now, something else you could do is instead of putting tabs on either side of your front piece, you could put 2 tabs on your side pieces and no tab on your front piece, in which case you'd put a 1/2 inch on either side of your side pieces and not add anything to your front piece. So this would just be 3.25, and then this would end up being 3.25. So let's add our tab on this one. Make sure I've got, nope, that's not the right one. That's the right direction. So I'm going to score in 1/2 inch. same on this one. So this is the side going against the back of the piece. This is the front. I'm going to put it in my scoreboard and just mark at 1.5. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Again, this is going against the back, so this is the front of the piece. So I'm going to mark that at 1.5. I am going to pull out my paper trimmer, and now I'm using my fixed blade trimmer for this one because it's easier to see where I'm cutting when I'm putting it in. So what I'm going to do is line up on my cutting line and cut from where I marked at the 1.5 inch to the back of the piece at the 2 inches. And that will create our angle. And we're going to do the same thing on this one. Again, I'm going to line up. So this trimmer has a little metal wire that shows where it will cut on. So I will place my piece in, put the cutting blade track thingy down so that I can then line up my back corner and where my front corner is going to be with the wire and cut. So these should now line up correctly. Why are they not lining up correctly? Because I cut this at 1.25 inches instead of 1.5. So we're going to change this and we're going to mark our 1.25 line and put it back in the trimmer and try again. Now, if you can cut straight with scissors, you could do this with scissors. I cannot cut a straight line with scissors, so I am using my paper trimmer because that will get better results. So again, corner to corner. Now these should line up, except they don't quite line up. Why don't they quite line up? Because yes, I managed to trim too much off of these. So it's slightly less than 1.25. Okay, so I would advise going a little bit higher just to make sure it lines up right. What I'm gonna do is trim this piece down. And I'm just gonna put a mark on there. Let's make sure. And I folded my tabs wrong on one of these. And this is why having the die makes it a lot easier. All right, so. Yep, it definitely needs to get trimmed down a little bit. There we go. Now they line up almost perfectly. Good enough at this point. Okay, so to create our back piece, we are going to cut down a piece of paper to 3.25 because that's how wide we need our pieces to be. And this is a sheet of, well, part of a sheet of 8.5 by 11. So when we then turn it and cut it in to 4.25, it should give us 2 4.25 pieces, and I did do some measuring, and this is slightly off on the 8.5, so we're just going to trim that piece down to 4.25. And actually, while I have the trimmer out, I'm going to go ahead and trim a piece of watercolor cardstock. No, I'm not going to use this one because the watercolor cardstock's thicker and my rotary trimmer does a better job cutting it. So we're going to cut that. And again, we're going to cut a piece, and we just need one of these. So we're going to cut it to, our width is 3 1/4. So I'm going to cut it at 3 and then 4. Because we want to have about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So there are our pieces. Now, to get our arch shape, you need something round. Preferably something like this cup where it's wider at the top and narrower at the bottom, so we can get 2 curves that will sit nicely inside each other. Another option is like a roll of tape where you've got the outer part and then the inner part you can use for creating your arches. So we're going to take our first piece and I'm going to put my cup on and I'm going to line it up near the top and just trace on my arch. And actually first let's get the center of this so that we can have our arch kind of centered. Just using my mat. So this line is my center line. So I'm going to put the center of my cup on the line. That's not the center of my cup. So I've pretty much got it centered. It's not exactly perfect. And then I'm going to just draw my arch over the top. And then I'm going to take my scissors. So that gets me my back arch. Now for my inside arch, we're gonna again line it up, center it again, try and center my thing, and it's a little too small. This fits inside this, so, but that's smaller than that. So this one might work. Place it on there. Center and make sure we are actually on the paper at the top of our arch. There we go. Trim our arch out. So this will then sit on here like so. And it's pretty good. The arch is not too bad. We're not too far off there. So I like that. Now for our second piece, which is the little framey piece, the non-die cut version of this piece, I'm not using my cup again. I am going to actually use the piece I cut so that they are actually going to match up exactly the same. So I am going to just line them up all nice and happy and trace. And then I'm going to use the mat we die cut out and center it on here and trace all around it. To get our frame piece, which is going to be a little on the skinny side, but that's okay. It's going to be reinforced by the acetate we're going to add behind. And I'm going to use a ruler and a craft knife to cut out the straight pieces. Being very careful to only cut out the pieces I want to cut out. Now, I know I've mentioned it before, but in case you are new, this is an acrylic ruler that has metal in the end, so it can be used as a straight edge when cutting, as long as I remember to use the metal side. If you use a regular acrylic ruler that doesn't have the metal in it, you're going to put nicks in the side of your straight edge, which is not pleasant. Okay, that did not cut all the way through. So we're going to go again. And now I'm going to cut up to the arch. and then use my scissors to trim the arch out. Now, you could use your scissors to cut the whole thing. Again, I'm not very good at keeping things straight, so that's why I used the ruler and the craft knife. So there we go, that's our framed piece cut out. We want to assemble, but before we can assemble, we are going to need to cut some insert pieces. So our height is a little less than 1¼ inches is what ended up happening to get everything to line up correctly. So I'm going to cut these guys out at, I think, 1¼ inch high at maybe the lowest part on these, and then I'm gonna do it a little shy of 4¼ wide, so that they're just the tabs are a little bit smaller than the tabs on this piece. So let's grab our paper trimmer. And then height-wise, the lowest we want it at 1 inch. Okay, I think that one's good. I think these should all work fine. So, oh, you know what? And for this one, I actually want to do 4 pieces because I stamped a whole bunch of extra critters for this one. We need to score everybody. Honestly, I'm just going to score at 3 3/4 on either side. And that should be good. I probably should have just gone ahead and scored and cut things the exact same as this at 4 1/4. But we're in the too late now. So I'm going to head and do that. Now we may need to do some adjusting to our tabs because they are going to be a little too high for attaching. So let's start our assembly and we can figure out what we need to do to adjust our tabs as we go. So again, I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to line up my first side, glue it on. Lining it up to make sure it's flush with the edge and flush with the bottom and top. Okay, so if I want that to go a little bit above, I need to mark where we're going to trim off our tabs. So I'm going to just do a quick trim. These sides I use my Barely Arts glue because there's a little bit more wiggle time. These, because I want them to glue down quickly, I'm going to use my art glitter glue because that dries faster, and just stick it down there just underneath. And then I'm going to go over here and double check to make sure it's not going to stick above on this side, and we're good on that side. So there's the first one. I want the next hill to go. Let's get my bone folder and crease this down. There we go. I want my next one to go about there. We're again going to flip and mark where we need to cut off. And I'm gonna pull him down. I don't have to worry about it on this one. We'll double check on this side to make sure we're good. So like, that one's gonna need to be trimmed, but let's attach this one and then we can figure out what trimming needs to occur on the other side. And that one's gonna go there, so we are gonna need to trim on this side. Okay, so let's go flip over to this side and see if any of our tabs need trimming. And I'd say this guy does, so let's mark that. Now we can apply glue to all of our little tabs. Uh-oh. There we go. Just a little adjusting there. There we go. We'll just attach this piece. And we've got a second pop box. So there we go, made without using any dies. Now it is much easier to do it if you're not trying to angle down without the dies. If you're just going straight across, because yeah, your measurements are going to be a lot more straightforward. And if you're not trying to create an arch for the back. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to do just a perfectly square pop box, same principles apply for your deciding on your measurements going this way. Is you want it to be 5.5 or less. And then you can do the sides, front and back all the same height, and then just pick whatever height you want, remembering not to go over 4.25. And if you're gonna have things sticking up, you want to make sure that they stay under the 4.25 measurement. There you go, pop box number 2. So I am gonna go ahead and die cut this again with the swirly background to create a swirly background for this. And then we're gonna ink them and then do the finished assembly. And I do need to do some figuring out to create mats for the sides and the front of this piece. So I'm gonna do that and I'll be back. Okay, so I want to ink up our background mats. Ooh, let me get an eraser out and erase that. And what I want to start by doing is just adding some blue ink as our base starting point for the background. So I'm gonna pull out some Tumbled Glass and just start with that. And I'm just gonna ink all around. So, and latest news in my household is my dog Bert, who is my evil genius, has figured out how to get into my garbage. So I have got one of those cabinet drawers that holds a garbage pail. And I have been in my house with my garbage like this since 2007. Have had dogs pretty much that entire time. And none of my dogs have ever gotten into the garbage until this past week. I went to the grocery store during my lunch hour on, I think, last Tuesday. Come home, and as soon as I walk in the door, there's the garbage bag and garbage everywhere. So I was sitting there thinking, all right, maybe I didn't shut the drawer all the way and he got into it that way. And hopefully that's the case, because otherwise I'm in trouble. Then on Thursday, I hear some noise in the kitchen and I go to investigate, and sure enough, Bert has gotten into the garbage again. He's got an empty bag of green beans. All right, I am gonna grab some more blues to just add some more interest to that, and I'm just gonna smush them on my mat. So that's Broken China and some Salty Ocean, just to give some variation to our backgrounds. And I'm gonna spray them. Run my fingers through and just kind of dip these in. And as I was saying, so I go into the kitchen or into the front room, and he's got his muzzle in an empty bag of frozen green beans. And I'm pretty sure I hadn't left the garbage open. All right, so we're gonna set these guys aside to dry. And now we're gonna work on another piece that's gonna involve drying time. So we're gonna take our two little frames and we're going to take a piece of acetate for each one. And what we're gonna do is glue them onto the acetate. I'm gonna glue it along the edge so it cuts down on how much trimming off I have to do. And I'm gonna use Barely Art for this. And these are sheets of craft plastic I bought from Amazon ages ago. You can use like the plastic material that's packaging for stamps and dies and all that stuff, and whatever kind of clear product you have for creating our little window here for our snow globe. Set that one aside and do our other one. So as I was saying, I caught him with the bag. Get it away from him, throw it in the garbage. Make sure I have the garbage drawer shut all the way, and then I kind of sneak into my laundry room and hide out in there. Sure enough, about a minute later, I hear noise and I peek into my kitchen and he is up on his hind legs pulling at the drawer that has the garbage pail in it. So he has now figured out how to get to my garbage pail. So I now have a baby lock on my garbage pail, even though there are no babies in this house, because my darling dog is getting into the garbage and he still hasn't figured out yet that he can't get in because he keeps trying, because I keep hearing him. So yeah, he's my evil genius. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this one back, and what I want to do is, because this is a snow globe, and actually for ease of moving it around, I think I'm gonna leave it on here for now and cut it out later. I wanna add some snow to it. And I'm just thinking about this and I'm like, you know what? It probably would work better if we put the snow on the back so it looks like it's inside. So this is Simon Says Stamp Falling Snow, and I'm gonna use, say, that section and just do some snow on here. Now for your snow, you have a couple options. And actually, now that I'm doing it this way, my second option, which was going to be to use any kind of opaque texture paste and any kind of glitter to give it a sparkly effect, isn't going to work because the glitter is going to be on the inside. If you want to do that, if that's what you have product wise, you're going to want to do it on the outside because you're going to want to have the glitter showing through. And if you do it on the back side with an opaque medium, you won't see the glitter. So I'm not going to do that. I do, however, have the Distress Grit Paste Snowfall, which is a sparkling translucent paste with clear glitter for textured dimensional effect. So that's going to give me a clear snowy effect on my window, or my snow globe front dome part. So I'm going to grab a palette knife and just smear some on. Now you could take translucent paste and add glitter to it, because it's translucent, the glitter will show through, and do it on the back. Now, depending on what you're using as your plastic and how tolerant it is of heat, you could theoretically heat set this and dry it, but I don't know how heat tolerant this stuff is. And I find it's just better to let this stuff dry on its own instead of using a heat gun to dry it. So I'm going to set this aside to dry, and I'm going to do my other one. Now again, you could use if you're working on the back side, you could use a plain translucent paste and add glitter to it to create the effect. So I'm just going to do it again on our other piece to get our snowy effect. And it'll help sell our snow globe idea here, having the snowiness. Now, if you don't have a stencil like this, you could just use like a hole punch and punch a bunch of small holes in a piece of either craft plastic and make it a permanent stencil, or just a piece of paper to get this effect. There we go, we've got our snowy effect again. I am going to go ahead and clean this stencil off. If you are using texture paste with stencils, you are going to want to make sure you clean them off well afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to clog up your stencil and basically ruin the stencil, because you won't be able to get stuff through the openings if it's clogged up with texture paste. Now, while the other pieces are drying, I also want to do some stuff to my hippos, which are going to go on the pink snow globe dome. And I've pulled out Distress Stickles in Clear Rock Candy to add some sparkle to the mistletoe on this one. The reason I'm using this instead of the texture paste is because it's easier to get it in this small spot. Stuff is starting to dry out. I've had these stickles forever. In fact, I had a thing of, I think, white lace stickles, which was what I wanted to use, but that is completely dead and dried out. So I'm just going to use a pointy tool. You can use a toothpick just to get it where I want it. And so that is going to go to the side to dry as well. For the wreath on this one, I've grabbed liquid pearls, and this color is hydrangea. And I'm just gonna hopefully add dots for the berries. And these hippos are a LaLa Land stamp set. And I think it might have been a Simon Says Stamptember exclusive stamp set. So I don't know that these are available, except possibly, you know, on the secondhand market. Ooh. Okay, so before that dries, since I flubbed up, I'm going to use the same tool to scrape it off as best I can. And try and do that without messing up any of the other ones. Okay, so we got a little bit of flub on there. So I may try adding some more gray ink. Now I colored these guys with Copic markers in a variety of grays. And this one's E70s. This is the warm grays. Those are the cool grays. So those are the hippo, that hippo. It's going to get a set aside to dry. Now for this guy, on the ornament, I used a clear glitter pen to add some sparkle to the center. And what I want to do is add some fluff to the hat. And I have got, this is like fluffy stuff. I bought it ages ago. I've probably had this for maybe a decade at this point. I don't even know who it's by, where I got it, anything like that. But it's fluffy powder. So I'm going to add that. You could always use, to add texture to your reindeer's hat, you could use liquid pearls. You could use a variety of texture pastes, whatever you want. You could also glue bits of cotton ball on, or if you've got fiber fill, like the stuff you fill sewing projects with, any of that would work in place of this flock stuff that I have. Because really all I'm trying to do is give it a fluffy texture. All right, I'm going to set him aside. I also have a couple of critters for the green and red one that have Santa hats that let's add some of the flocky stuff too. So I got that Santa hat and that Santa hat. For this Santa hat, I'm going to use my tweezers because that's going to make life easier. And the reason I'm doing it on a paper is so that when I'm done, I can put the unused bits back in my container. I'm just pushing it back because it got a little bit out of place. Again, you could use a toothpick for doing that. Just want to make sure it's fully covered. All right. So those guys can dry, and once they're dry, once everything's dry, we'll be ready to fully assemble. Now, I also did some figuring out for creating the matte panels to go on the side of our non-die cut box. So let's go ahead and create those pieces. So I've grabbed a scrap piece of red cardstock, and I'm gonna grab my paper trimmer. Now, this is how I came up with my figures, is I went back in and double checked the highest point of this, and it is, so I went back in and did a little measuring, and this guy is not quite 2 1/4 height wise, and it's about 2 1/4 width wise. So since we want to have a little bit of the green showing around it, I just went ahead and decided what I'm going to do is 2 by 2 squares for the 2 sides, and then the front is 3 1/4 by a little over 1. It's like 1 1/8. So for that piece, I'm going to do 3 by about 1. So we're going to cut a 1-inch piece off of there, 2 2-inch pieces. So I'm going to cut it at 4 and then trim it down to 2. Mostly I'm just leaving a bigger scrap than if I had cut 2 and then cut 2 and then cut the 1 off the end kind of thing. So that leaves me a bigger, more useful scrap. And then cut this down to 2. Now for these, to get our triangle shape, I am going to go ahead and measure up 1 inch from the bottom and mark it. And then I'm just going to do like I did last time with my trimmer. And again, you can use your scissors. I'm going to cut from my mark up to the top corner. And so I'm just going to line those 2 items up in my paper trimmer. And slice. And then do the same thing on this one. So these should now line up and leave us a little green border. And they do, yay! So I'm gonna go ahead and glue these guys down on this one. I need to use the dies to cut out the ones for the pink. So I will do that after this, and while we're waiting on our glittery bits to dry. And then we will be ready to assemble everything once the glittery bits are dry. And I did this one backwards because I did it going for both sides, and we're just gonna set that aside and let the glue dry on that, and I'm gonna cut one out and glue it on. So I'm gonna do that, and I will probably put the side panels on the other pop box and come back once everything is all dry so that we can do the final assembly on these guys. Okay, so these guys are dry. So I'm just going to trim out so that we just have the plastic behind the frame piece. So be careful you don't cut into your piece. It'd probably be better cutting this way. That might work a little bit better. Got a little bit of overhang over here. And this guy. So there we go. We've got our 2. You know what? I put this on the front side, not the back side on this one. So there we've got our 2 little arches. I'm going to set those aside because it's going to be easier to put our pieces in. That's dry. I'm just not sure. Those guys are dry. All right, I think we might be good. Go. Those guys are dry. Let me just see if I can cover that up with a marker. Let's see if I can color over it at all. Not really. All right, so we're just gonna leave it. It's a handmade item, so it's not perfect. Just gonna blend that out a little bit. So they're going on this one. And then we need our blue background arch pieces. So that one goes with this. We're gonna glue that on. Line it up and stick it down. Now you could also add glittery snow to the background piece too if you want to, but I don't know that it's necessary. Once we put our snow globe front piece in, I think we'll be good to go, and it'll look snowy in the background. So I think we're gonna put this hippo back here, a little more towards the middle so it's not gonna stick out too much. So I'm keeping in mind, if I want it to fit into my envelope, that I want to make sure none of my pop-up pieces stick out too far from when folded flat. You don't want a ton sticking out or it's not going to fit in your envelope, and that should be fine. So we'll glue that guy there. So this is why I'm waiting to put on the front piece, because it'll make it much easier to attach our gang o' hippos. Just trying to decide on the best placement so that we'll be able to see everybody, and I think we'll go with that guy there. All right, I'm holding it up like this so that I can see it, so I know where to place this hippo. And I'm gonna stick the hippo a little lower down, I think, because I don't want to completely block that guy in the back. So I think we're gonna stick her down like that. And then this piece, we're gonna glue in here, and I'm just gonna stick it in and then add my glue on the inside of the front piece, because that will be easier than trying to make sure I get the glue in the right spots on this, I think. Slide this all the way down to the bottom and hold it in place and press down. And so there is our hippos. And I'm like looking at this, and this piece is so not straight down at the bottom. So there's our hippo snow globe card, pop box card. So I'm gonna set that one aside and we can do the other one. So again, I'm gonna glue my back piece on. And for this one, I've got a bunch of woodland critters and Christmas presents. So I am gonna do, I had figured out my layout for this one. So this guy's gonna go on the moose's head. And these stamps are a bunch of lawn fawn stamps. The squirrels are from Lawn Fawn, Simon Says Stamptember exclusive, so are not available anymore. And I don't even have the dies for those because I didn't get there in time to get those. Should be fine. So we're just going to glue our moose down in the back there. I don't remember what set the moose is from or the bunny. And the presents are from a variety of different stamp sets. This guy and this guy might be from Joy to the Woods, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, we're gonna add a hat to our chipmunky friend. And then I was thinking I'd put a present on the fox's back. This guy's gonna go here, and we're gonna put a present in his hands. So that's what it's looking like, and I'm gonna add the acorn present by the bunny. And I'm gonna stick a present on the back of the moose. And this guy, I think I'm gonna stick on there on the front piece. And then we can add this in, and I'm just gonna do the same thing I did before, add the glue inside. Slide my piece in till it's flush at the bottom and stick it down. Hold pressure for a moment so that it sticks down. I may have some envelope issues with him because I forgot to double check where his tail was going to stick out, but hopefully not too bad. So there's the one we created without using dye. Now you can stamp a sentiment, and had I been thinking about it, I probably would have stamped like Merry Christmas on here and on here before putting it on the pieces. What I may end up doing is stamping it and either fussy cutting it out or stamping it on a little strip to go on either of those, because it'll be easier than trying to flatten it out and stamp all of these. This one might not be too bad, or this one. I'm probably gonna add Merry Christmas to the fronts at some point, but I think we're good for now with these. So that's all for today. See how, and sorry about the glare. Okay, that's a little bit better glare wise. So there are our two Snowglobe pop box cards, one made with dies and one made without. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. It really does help out my channel if you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, or even leave me a comment down below. Even just putting like a little smiley face in the comment section really does help with the algorithms for YouTube, where YouTube will push my video out for more people to see it. So I would really appreciate it if you did all of those things. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.